I'm going to read a story that was published in Narrative. It's called A Dark and Empty Corner. God was present that Thursday night in June when Peggy and Winston volunteered at the Family History Center. He hung about the one-room building behind the parking lot of the Church of the Latter-day Saints and listened in on their conversation from the dark corner dedicated to microfilm research. During the past 2 years, Winston and Peggy had taken notice of each other at church and organizational meetings, but they had never been together in an intimate setting like this. That's what it felt like to the two of them, that the Heavenly Father was watching their every move. There was a sense of urgency in the air, even though it was only 8 o'clock, 2 more hours to go until closing time, and only one hobbyist genealogist still in the building, slowly scrolling his way through miles of microfilm in search of his forebears. "Would you like some hot chocolate? I'm thinking of making some," Peggy said to Winston. They had been sitting across from each other at a large table in the middle of the room, Winston at the computer answering email, and Peggy filling out loan forms and coloring in the volunteer shift schedules for the next month. "No, thank you. I don't really like chocolate." This reminds me of my mother when she was dying," Peggy said. I brought her a cup of coffee and she refused it. She said she never really liked the taste of it. It turns out she always made coffee for my father and never drank it herself. Imagine that. People without faith choose strange things to believe in. Peggy had lost her mother 3 years earlier, and Winston not only had outlived his parents, but also recently buried his wife. Now, Peggy at 73, and certainly Winston at 81, were the next in line, but both were in good health and working to keep it that way. Winston rode his bicycle for exercise, and Peggy ate at least 1 apple every day, cut it up into pieces, and packed it in her purse in a plastic baggie to snack on throughout the day. They both went to church regularly. Winston, a lifelong Mormon, and Peggy, a convert after her divorce 15 years ago. And yet faith did not make the idea of death comforting or even approachable. Instead of picturing a meeting with the Heavenly Father, Peggy kept stubbornly coming back to the memory of her mother's deathbed, the image of sunken eyes and immobile hands lying on top of the bed sheets. Winston always believed that families were forever, that if he was valiant in his devotion to the church, after death he would be reunited with everyone he loved. But now that his wife was dead, Winston was living on his own and enjoying it very much. He felt like a schoolboy at the beginning of summer vacation. "Listen to this," Winston said. "Here somebody thinks she's related to Boleslaw the Brave, the first king of Poland. Everyone's related to Charlemagne, but Boleslaw? What a name. Maybe we could use him for our trivia contest." Peggy pushed aside her requisition forms and reached for the office laptop. She pulled up Wikipedia. "Boleslaw the Brave," she read, "born in 967 AD, one of the most powerful monarchs in Eastern Europe, brought Christianity to Prussia. A good guy then. I've always wondered what Prussia was." Apparently, old Prussians were conquered and completely vanquished by the Teutonic Knights, Peggy read. Isn't Wikipedia great? It's got answers to every question I can think of. "No wonder the Prussians were vanquished," Winston said. "I mean, if their religion was paganism." "But the Teutonic Knights, there's an ambitious crowd. They united with something called the Hanseatic League and took over the entire Baltic region. Not bad, right? They didn't have those cruises going around the Baltic back then, did they? You and I should take a trip, visit all those countries, Germany, Sweden, you know. Do Teutonic Knights still exist, I wonder? Peggy said. I would like to be one. Bring Christianity to remote lands. Fight the good fight. I'm hungry, Winston said. He yawned and stretched, straightening his posture in the chair. It's amazing how hungry you can get sitting all day. A cell phone went off in a digital version of the old-fashioned telephone ring. God was watching Peggy and Winston, but others had their priorities as well. Peggy looked at the number and turned off the ringer. Winston cleared his throat. A man wants to date me, she said. And you? Do you want to date him? Well, me, I just want to be friends. The whole thing is a nuisance. He wants to take me out to dinner, but I would much rather stay home and cook for myself. I'm not much for going out. I think I'm too old for that. Peggy didn't feel old. In fact, sitting across from Winston and watching the blush take hold of Winston's pale, clean-shaven cheeks, she didn't feel her age at all. She could have been 15 or 100. It wasn't her physical age that mattered, but the fact that here was a man whose spirit seemed to be completely in tune with her own. Winston had the same sensation, as if a communication was occurring between them that went beyond words. Human language, he thought, was not adequate for spiritual union. Boy, I'm hungry, Winston said, patting himself on the stomach. I found a candy bar in my purse earlier today, Peggy said. I don't usually eat candy and I don't have any idea where it came from, but it's packaged and sealed. Would you like to have it? The room grew quiet as if God was holding his breath. They could hear the gentle whirring of the fans inside their computers. The clock above the bathroom door ticked audibly. Winston thought he heard the shuffle of the microfilm being rewound in the dark room and remembered that they still had a visitor in there. Peggy glanced at the laptop where the page about the Teutonic Knights was still open. Would you like to close this place early tonight? Peggy said. She felt her heart skip a beat and then come back a flutter. I've answered 109 emails today. Not bad for one evening's work, huh? Winston replied quickly. Peggy's question sounded very much like a proposition. He asked cautiously, what do you have in mind? Whole Foods is still open. You could get a sandwich there or a salad. They have wonderful salads. Although it's a dangerous place. The other day I went there to buy a loaf of bread and they had fresh strawberries on sale. I ended up with a box of them, and whatever am I going to do with a whole box of strawberries? It was maybe at this point, or maybe when Winston had been hesitating about which question to ask, that God quietly slipped out of the building. Winston could hear his stomach growling. Peggy remembered a phone call she owed her daughter. She had been meaning to call her tonight after her shift at the center. Do you want to tell our visitor we want to close by 9? Winston said. Sure, but you do it. I'm too shy. Me too. I too am very shy. Winston got up from his seat. He placed his hands on his hips and stretched his torso forward and backward, cracking his joints. Boy, this feels good. Peggy got up and, following his lead, stretched, lifting her arms up and then trying to touch her toes. Together, they walked around the copy machine to the entrance of the microfilm reading area, and Winston announced loudly, "The center will be closing in 15 minutes. Please finish up." He interrupted himself in the middle of the phrase because he and Peggy saw at the same time that all the machines were switched off. The microfilm rolls had been put away, and the room stood empty, as if there had never been anyone there at all.